I've had a couple video requests for people wanting to know how I go about doing an engine break-in. Well, it's really simple to do. The worst thing you could do is rebuild an engine and then just go wide open throttle and just ride it as hard as you can. You need to allow the engine to have time for the seals and the piston rings and everything to seat the way that they need to seat. And the way that you do that is by expansion and contraction through hot and cold. So when I first build an engine, the first thing I do is fire it up, and then I just listen to it to see if there's anything out of the ordinary right away, if there's a misfire, anything like that. If it sounds okay, then I just let it idle. I hit the throttle the tiniest bit, just enough to get it to idle if it won't idle on its own on a cold engine. Once it's up to temperature while idling, I just let it sit there and idle for another 10 minutes or so, right around there. Once it idles, I shut it off. I check the fluids, check the gas, make sure that it didn't eat too much gas, check the radiator, make sure the coolant level is still good, check the transmission fluid level, make sure everything's still topped off and good. After that 15 minutes of idling, and after I check all those things, I usually wait a couple of hours for the engine to cool back down, because the process of expansion and contraction is what breaks in the engine. So if you fire it up again before it's cooled down, then you're not allowing all that expansion and contraction to take place. So after that, then the second time I fire it up, I take it for very slow, like quarter throttle rides or so, and I don't get up high in the gears. That really doesn't matter as far as engine performance, but it will under engine braking, because if you're going faster and you let off the throttle, that's more force on the engine. So I usually keep it in second, don't go above second or third gear, and don't go above a quarter throttle or so. I usually ride that for, once again, about 10 or 15 minutes, and then let it cool down completely again. Do the same thing at up to half throttle. Same thing over again, let it cool down, and then up to 3/4 throttle, and then up to full throttle. That's going to total up probably about a day's worth of riding. If you ride for 15 minutes, quit for 15 minutes, ride for 15 minutes, back and forth like that. The longer you let that process take, more than likely the longer your engine's going to stay with good compression. Another thing some people do is they mix their gas oil ratio with more oil, and you don't want to do that, because when you put more oil in the gas, that means that less gas is getting into the carburetor, and you're actually making a lean condition. So when you rebuild an engine, you want to break it in on whatever mixture and whatever oil you're going to run for the life of the engine. In my opinion, it really doesn't matter if you're going to change oils, if you're going to go from AMSOIL to Klotz or whatever. Just make sure you keep the same ratio, and make sure you don't mix the two oils in the same tank of fuel. You want to make sure that it's a fresh tank of fuel with preferably the same mixture. If you do change your mixture, more than likely you might want to take a look at your jetting or do a plug chop or something like that, which is another video I'll do later on, is how to do a plug chop. But also in between each one of those sets of heating the quad up and cooling it down, I pop out both plugs, make sure that they're looking about how they're supposed to look. They're supposed to have like a coffee stain kind of tan to them. If they're black, you're running rich, or you're running too much oil, or you're getting a misfire or something like that. And if they're on the other end of that and they're running lean, then it's going to be a whiter, lighter tan kind of color. So that's my advice as far as how braking goes. Feel free to add your own advice if you'd like.